everybody, welcome to another episode of Fresh Perspectives. My name's Marcus Nayoum. I'm a manager here at the Strategy Group, joined here by my colleague Liam Hoffman, who's also a manager. Liam, it's good to be here today with you. We're going to be talking about journey mapping, what the value of journey mapping is, some key challenges with journey maps, some examples of some of the maps that we've done with some of our clients, and some key takeaways that you can walk away with. But maybe just to get started, Liam, do you want to talk a little bit about some of your experiences with journey maps?
Yeah, so as Marcus mentioned, I'm a manager here at the Strategy Group. I've been with the Strategy Group for about 5 years and primarily working with clients on customer experience, employee experience, innovation, and all encompassing that is strategy. So journey maps are a really critical tool in being, for a couple of things. One is to align stakeholders, key stakeholders, on what the experience actually is for a customer, a user, or even the business itself. The other thing is it's a strategic tool, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But rather than just being sort of a standalone design artifact that's typically used in human-centered design or design thinking work, it's a lot more than that. It can be sort of a living document or artifact that can be used by organizations in a strategic way rather than just an operational or tactical way. So I've had a lot of experience sort of developing those and sort of taking those from being just a static sort of visual hierarchy of a process into a more strategic tool. So we'll talk about that. And I guess the other part that I'll just touch on is also, advancements in AI and technologies is also something we're very focused on here at the Strategy Group. So that's another layer that sort of we'll talk about in terms of journey mapping. So that's a bit about me. Do you want to talk a bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I think probably quite similar. Yeah. I've been here for nearly 4 years at the Strategy Group, and we've worked obviously on a lot of journey maps together, separately too. And I think you're right, the key thing about a journey map is that it's a tool which can be used for different organizations to identify areas of opportunity. And there's different ways you can portray a journey map as well. It can be super visual, you can have storyboarding elements in it, or it could be more process driven. It depends on what the organization is looking to identify throughout that journey map. And I guess those different elements within the map, it's quite varied.
A journey map, typically, so there's roots in sort of human-centered design thinking. Yeah. It's basically trying to put the customer at the center of an organization through a visual map that provides an overview of their experience or their process, a process they go through, or their use of a product or service that an organization provides. So it's typically a linear process, similar to a process map, but focused on the customer. And then sort of there's a couple of underpinning elements there. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's underpinning elements to it. So if I think of a journey map, I call them swim lanes. I think we use that language quite a lot. It's because it's quite a linear thing, you have these different lanes. And at the top, you'd always start with what are the high level stages? What are the big kind of steps that the customer goes throughout their end-to-end journey of whatever journey it is you're defining. Then supporting those stages are more detailed actions or steps within that. So within a stage, you might have 3 or 4 different key actions the customer follows. And then you'd want to capture what that then emotional experience is of the customer. So the actions are almost the process and the typical steps someone goes through. But what's really important is that because the journey map depicts that experience, you want to capture what's the emotional state of a customer going through that journey. What are the highs and lows? Are they feeling anxious? Are they feeling upset? Are they feeling happy? Are they feeling confused? Whatever the emotions is, that helps to bring to life those actions a bit more. And you can also capture the expectations too. So at each step that the customer's going through, what are they actually expecting to occur? And this is, I think, really important in that current state journey map to make sure that you're clarifying what those expectations are, because it can then make it a lot easier when you come up with a future state journey map and future state solutions to realize, okay, well, if the customer's expecting this, does the current state actually align with those expectations? And then supporting the emotions and expectations, you would have pain points. And I think that's a pretty obvious one. What are the issues? What are the bottlenecks? What do people get frustrated by throughout the journey in the different steps? But also, just as important as the pain points, is also highlighting the gain points, because when you build out solutions, you also want to amplify the good. What does the organization or what does the journey highlight to a customer that's really good? What do they enjoy most about it? And how can we look to see and amplify that experience? And then you can also capture, and this maybe gets into service blueprint territory, which we can discuss a bit later, but you can then look at, okay, well, if you've got the customer experience with their actions, their emotions, their pain points, well, what are their interactions with other people? So you can have like touch points, but then you can have like more detailed like employee or business actions and see the steps there. But that starts to kind of merge into more of like a blueprint. So we won't go into too much detail on that now.
So just to unpack that a bit, because you said quite a lot there.
Yeah.
So if we were starting a journey map, we would typically start with the stages at the top, which is sort of the high level milestones that a customer or user would go through. Under that, you sort of have your steps, which can either be steps that the customer or user is taking to go through this journey, or the specific touch points that they may interact with the actual organization. Under that, you typically have the emotional journey. Is that what you said? Yeah. And so that way we can show sort of the dramatic arcs in the journey where there's sort of the high points, where there's the low points, and where there's a need for improvement. And that's where you can then go into specifics in the next lane down, which is your pain points, your gain points, the needs of the customer. And then, as you mentioned, I think, and that's also the powerful part of a journey map, is sort of connecting that to the internal processes that sort of underpin that journey and make that journey function. And that's when it becomes more or less sort of an exercise in putting the customer at the center and designing things around the customer, but more about a proper strategic view of exactly how that experience works currently and maybe how it should work in the future.
Yeah, it's essentially like a painting of like an experience all on one page. It can be a very long page. I've seen some pretty big ones we've created, but also some more simpler ones as well. And you can like choose to see how much detail you actually want to go into with the journey map. Yeah,
and I mean, simply put, it is sort of like just a visual representation of something that could be put on paper. But most of the time when we go in an organization, these details are in people's heads. And those heads are in teams that are often siloed from other teams within the organization. So putting it out on a piece of paper, which is pretty much what it is allowing us to also build buy-in and alignment across those different teams to ensure that they understand how their work or what they do impact the customer at the end of it.
Exactly. And I think that's a good point you raised too. Like a lot of the knowledge is within a lot of people's heads. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we go about getting insights from the customer to inform a journey map?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, journey maps are a human-centered design tool. So we take a human-centered design process to that. So that means a divergent process where we capture data. Oftentimes we want to make sure that's both qualitative and quantitative, and that comes from a range of different sources. So that means internally looking at what the current view of the journey is from an internal perspective, but also going out to customers and understanding their sort of view of the journey and the steps they take. As we've sort of mentioned or alluded to, the journey map shows a point in time, a linear perspective of a journey. There are many different paths that people could go down and things that could happen that could sort of derail or cause a different outcome in that journey. The research really helps us identify what would be the most common journey. And so often we would go out and talk to customers via interviews, or at least surveys, consultations internally with the different teams that are involved along the way. Observations also come into that. So we try to make sure there's a multitude of methods we're using.
Yeah. And is that where you start though? Like, would you start with the customer insights? Would you start with the internal stakeholder view? Like, what do you think is the best approach?
I think typically, depending on the maturity of the organization in terms of CX or even employee experience, and I mean customer experience for any of those who don't know what CX is, sometimes you need to build some buy-in around these kind of tools or these kind of visuals that you're developing. So starting from an internal perspective is a good place to understand what success looks like, what the vision is, and what the current assumptions and understanding is of that journey. So a great place to start is just by getting a number of people from different parts of the business in the room and just identifying what their current knowledge is of the process, the challenges, so that when you're going out to the customers themselves and highlighting the reality that they've conjured up, making sure that aligns or doesn't align with the actual what the senior stakeholders have come up with. Exactly. Would you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think starting, and a lot of the time we get in either physical room or do a virtual whiteboard, and you've got the different stages of the journey kind of mapped out on the wall. and then lots and lots of different sticky notes, and you're kind of just plotting along, okay, what are the actions, or what do we think, like from our experience as an internal stakeholder, like what do we feel the customers experience at this stage, what are their pain points, what are their issues. And then I think that also does help when you go into interviews. You kind of then see, okay, well, like you've got an understanding of what it is. You want to try and block out the bias from that initial workshops that you do, but it helps give a clear understanding of the different steps. So then when you actually do those interviews, those observations, you can start drilling down on specifics from your initial understanding, because you've already mapped out from the internal perspective what that journey is. And then when you do the interviews, you've got then the outside in perspective. So it's the mixture of that inside out and outside in, which is always the best way, I think, to kind of make sure that you're covering off all the different perspectives and different angles to make sure it's going to be the most accurate representation of the journey.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. And I guess in terms of mapping it out, you mentioned there you can either do it digitally or physically.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much to actually get it started. It's really just sticky notes, some Sharpies, and just the right people in the room, which I know can be hard, especially given this time of the year, January, not many people are back. But getting those people in the room who have that knowledge, the perspectives that you need to sort of form that initial skeleton of a journey map is really important. Something to also note in the human-centered design or design thinking methodology is just the importance of iteration as well. So you're not going to nail it the first time. There's a lot of data to be collected, and you're probably going to have a very overwhelming picture of the business, like when you first start. So the first part being the divergent process, we're collecting as much data as possible, and the journey map will look very overwhelming at first. But then it's about sort of cutting it back and understanding what is a way to make it more concise but also clear, so that we can start making decisions using them.
Yeah, absolutely. One that we worked on quite recently last year was with an aged care organisation, trying to map out the experience of people moving into a residential aged care home, what their lived experience was like, through to, I guess, the end of what that looks like for them. So do you want to maybe start with like talking a bit about what that was like coming up with a journey map in an industry like aged care?
Yeah, that's a great starting point, and I think from this we can also extrapolate into service blueprints, because it did sort of transform and evolve into that. So initially the scope was really to, as Marcus mentioned, understand the experience within the residential aged care arm of the organization, and understand the customer's view from an onboarding process, or pre-entry. What that means is when somebody who's either already sort of in maybe an independent home, or someone who's ready to move into that next level of care, which requires a bit more support, assistance, what's that transition like? What's that experience like moving into that? How are those decisions made? And then once they're in that particular environment, how do they navigate that to the point where they're finally settled in? That was pretty much the scope of the journey. And so that required a couple different things. Again, as we mentioned before, we started with just understanding, what is the current landscape of that, or what's our current understanding of that process. And that was based on work we've done with them in the past, as well as some consultations with some stakeholders internally. But then the other element that we didn't have there was the understanding from the customers.
Yeah,
Great.
I do. And that was interesting as well, trying to do with that project, because we want to understand the customer perspective. And the customers are people who have moved into a resident, which is like a nursing home for people who aren't familiar with the terms of aged care. So moving into like a nursing home, a lot of them didn't want to be there. So the visit maybe had like a 4, and it's not safe for them to go back home, or their health is just like deteriorating so much they just need that care. They could be bedridden. So like a lot of those people don't actually want to be there. So then it was interesting, you go out and you talk to these people in like, in their room within this nursing home, or while they're maybe having lunch or having breakfast, and really just trying to empathize and understand their perspective. And it's quite eye-opening to see what they talked about. And then I think the emotional aspect is like really crucial in these interviews to get a lot of that, and especially with the different steps. So that was very eye-opening. But what was also interesting as well is that, especially in the whole part to move into the nursing home, a lot of these people actually weren't involved in that process at all. And so you go in with maybe the assumption that, these people, they may have been involved, but these are people who maybe they had a 4, they're in hospital, and they don't know maybe what's going on. So then it's the family who steps in. So it might be the daughter, the son, a niece, a nephew, maybe a close family friend. They step in, and that process of like the interviews of talking to the customers the initial customer who were like the elderly people, and then we realized like, well, actually, for the first stage of the journey, the main customer here is actually the family members. So we made sure to then talk to as many family members as we can to understand what their experience was like, trying to, deal with one, like the grief and like, I guess the distress of like having their mum or dad kind of deteriorate so much, end up in hospital and like, hang on, they can't go back home. What the hell are we going to do? So understanding that, and that really was like, I think that's the value of the journey mapping exercise too, because it then brings forward those insights and it helps you identify who the actual real customers are at different stages of the journey. So when you come up with solutions, you kind of know who you actually need to start maybe targeting or thinking about from a different perspective. So I think that was like a really great exercise when we did it, journey mapping in an industry like aged care, where you think your typical client is the elderly people, but it's actually not just them, it's also the family members, because they're heavily involved in the decision-making processes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the research process as well, is just identifying those insights that completely change the whole basically look of the journey map of what we assumed it was going to be.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to, yes, take the internal perspective, but also the customer perspective to really understand what's currently happening in that space. And so that also highlights, the fact that this is a really large aged care organization that oftentimes, is in this bubble, thinks they understand the customers, but then when we actually go out and talk to them, there's a lot more under that surface layer of what they think is happening.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess the next part of that process was really to then map that customer experience against what's happening internally, so we can start making some good strategic decisions about how we improve the pains, as we said before, and elevate the gains that are currently there. And so that's when we start getting into service blueprint territory. So a service blueprint is sort of an extension of a journey map, where we sort of map the elements of the customer journey, so like a touch point such as moving into the home, to the process that's happening in the front end and back end of the organization. And we tend to split these up into the front stage, which is actions or touch points that the customers can see. So this will be, say an aged care resident wants to move into a home, they would reach out to the aged care facility. The front stage action for the aged care facility is to log them into a system as someone who's interested. Then we move into the backstage, and these are elements or actions, touch points that the customer cannot see. So these are all the back-end processes and systems that underpin that journey. So in that instance again, where you've got the aged care resident who's interested in moving the home, the aged care staff would be putting that into the system, and then that system would be communicating to another internal team that needs to put a process in place to actually put a contract together or something like that. That is not visible to the customer until the contract is produced and then relayed back through that process. But the customer could maybe see that that's about 5 days or something, and they're thinking, why is it 5 days? Like, why is this process taking so long? But they can't see it in the background, and that's where sort of mapping this out, you get the full visual picture of that whole process and understanding where those bottlenecks or pains are, why they're caused, and what's the consequences. So a lot more detail basically. So you got like this journey map here, which is like the customer experience, and you got this whole layer down here, which is all these front stage and backstage actions from the employee. But it's very valuable, I think, and that really helps then to, when you come up into like a solution mode and you start thinking about, okay, how can we actually turn this, experience into an improved experience? By knowing that detail, it makes it a lot easier, I think, to work out, okay, well, we need to do these solutions in the back end because this is going to then enable a better customer experience. Yeah, that's right. And I think with the blueprints as well, is they can often be quite overwhelming. So simplifying those to thinking about it from a strategy point of view, your people, process, and systems, and just trying to always frame it in the context is really important. Yeah, exactly. And what about the flip side? What about like an employee experience journey map, an EX map? It's still similar concept, but the customer in this instance is the employee.
So do you want to maybe talk about an example of where you've built out an employee experience journey map and what the difference may be between that and a CX map, if there are differences?
Yeah, so I think if we keep it in the realm of aged care still and we think about it from the staff perspective, a lot of time the customer experience provided is based on the people that provide that service. So you're what some organizations would call your internal customer. And again, it's framing who is the customer in this instance.
Yeah.
So in this case, we had a similar project with the aged care company where we were able to just define the onboarding and training experience for them to feel ready to deliver a customer experience like the one we described. With that, we still have the customer at the center. Like ultimately, the goal is to be more customer centric and to design a customer experience that's good for them. So how do we prepare or equip our staff to be able to deliver that customer experience? So rather than going out to customers, we go out to staff and understand and observe what they're currently doing in their process. And similar lanes, it wouldn't change much, but I guess it's another way of understanding at different levels of the organization what are those key challenges that we need to overcome if our ultimate goal is to improve the customer experience, so that our staff feel cared about, equipped to, and confident that they're able to deliver the customer experience that we've defined we want to deliver. And then that's ended up, so I guess the next part of that and the customer experience is how do we make the things that come out of that tangible?
You've got your current state experience. You want to think about, well, what does a future state look like? Great way of doing that is getting in a room with different stakeholders within the business and who are potentially like SMEs in different areas of the stages of the journey map you've defined, and ideating and getting really creative and thinking about, okay, what are some solutions which is going to make this a better experience? But it's well and good just saying, okay, let's come up with ideas. You want to be able to use the journey map as a tool, but like build on that as well. And the journey map can be quite detailed. So then getting people together in a workshop and saying, okay, here's a journey map, come up with ideas, isn't as simple as you think it is. You need to kind of break it down, the map into different elements, and also introduce some new elements. So what we typically do is we take the different like emotional pain points, expectations, those different elements of the journey, and look to kind of create how might we statements. And a how might we statement's really good because you can think about what the actual problem is you're trying to solve to come up with a creative solution. So we typically try to convert a lot of those different elements into this how might we statement. So then within a workshop, we can get participants to then start thinking a bit more creatively about what the problems are they need to solve. And we really try to encourage 3 different types of solutions. You can say like small, more tactical solutions. So like, for example, could be like, I don't know, let's do a suggestion box for customers at an aged care organization to put their feelings forward. Or you could have like a bigger solution. So that could be more around like creating a new, like an app or something. Or then you can think of a creative solution which then kind of integrates like AI or machine learning. You think really crazy and things that you think it might not actually work, but let's just get it down there. Because you want to be able to get as many different solutions, go as broad as you can. So then you can then start narrowing down and working out, it's like divergent, convergent thing come back in and working out, okay, what are the actual best solutions here across maybe like a horizon. So like a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years out, that the organization should work towards to make this an improved customer or employee experience.
Yeah, so I think you touch on a really important part there as well, is oftentimes when we're working with clients, and we had this recently with an insurance client, in building out a customer journey map, there was a number of ideas there.
Yeah.
Wild cards, really long-term, crazy ones, but if journey mapping isn't happening around the organization, or even if there's not really an appetite to sort of, a big focus on customer centricity or employee centricity, there's a real need to then build buy-in. And that's where I guess once you have the journey map, you want to show it to as many people as possible in a really clear way. And then one example of that would be to bring them into a workshop to show them it and then ideate on some of the opportunities that have come out of it. The other part of that is once you have those ideas, as you were building on, is sort of prioritizing the ones that we can sort of use to then form a use case for why customer experience is important, why journey maps are important, and how we intend to use this rather than just as a static document that shows the current process, but actually use this as a tool to develop a strategy or a roadmap around actually improving the customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's always an enjoyable process actually when you get into that solution mode, because you're trying to, because especially when you've been involved in all that research too, and you've done the interviews, and then saying, okay, like, what did these, like, and you start thinking about like the people you interviewed as well, because like the real people.
Yeah.
So you start thinking, well, like, say Tony or like Greg or Mary, whoever it is, it's like, is this solution actually going to like be beneficial to them? Is it going to help them? And that's like, it's a fun process.
Yeah, and that's where things like, if you develop personas to help people better empathize with the people in the journey, that also helps too. There are numerous points in time where we've developed sort of 2 journey maps within one, depicting different sort of extremes of a persona or something like that, to highlight the different journeys that they can go on using the same service or product. And so those can be helpful in building empathy with whoever the stakeholders are in the room. I just want to touch on as well, when you get to that point where you're trying to prioritize what are the things that we need to work on, quick wins is often a place we start. And what we mean by quick wins is something that's relatively easy to put together or to implement, but something that we know may have like a high impact or provide value to the customer experience. The other part of that is having either a micro working group or an owner that is able to sort of implement these changes. And once you get sort of a couple of wins on the board, you start to realize like that you've actually now got a journey map that informs what decisions we make around improving the customer experience, but we've also got a process for actually making things happen out of that. And I think that's the biggest part for organizations that go through this exercise of, yes, you've developed this artifact which looks nice, looks great, and is easily communicated across all levels of the organization. But there's also the other part of, okay, but now what? What do we do with it?
Yeah, and that's what, and I actually want to first talk about like the quick wins. I think that's a really important thing. I know it's like, it might sound buzzword, like the quick wins, but I think when you go through this process of doing the interviews, mapping out the journey, and you get those pain points, you identify some really quick wins. Like there's one example that just sticks in my head. It was with this HK company, went out to interview people, and there was one man, he was 100 years old, he's in a wheelchair, and he was pretty happy with his general experience, but a few things were like little things, but those little things made actually a huge difference to his experience. And one of those little things was that there weren't enough teaspoons at tea time. So when he had his tea, he didn't have a teaspoon, he had to use a fork to stir. And he said that he just really didn't like that at all. And then other people, this is actually in the focus, other people were like, oh yeah, like that annoys me as well. And the thing was like, he was like, it's just very improper to have tea and not have a teaspoon to stir your tea. And it's a little thing, but like that's a quick win. It's like, you can just buy some more teaspoons. Like it's not that difficult to do, but it would have made a huge difference. It would have just improved this guy's experience. But then basically, by not having teaspoons, he decided he's not going to drink tea anymore because he felt it was improper. And he said he was grown up saying you need to have tea with a teaspoon. Little thing. And I thought that was a funny mention. I was like, it's a little thing, but it shows it's like,
it's an edge case, but it still needs to be considered. I mean, we're trying to basically improve these.
Exactly. And then if you can work out, okay, are there like multiple instances where these little things are occurring? Well, then it's like, cool, let's just have this a quick win. And it's just a small improvement to fix the experience rather than going out and talking to people and then just asking them what their feelings are, what their experience is like. And they say, well, why are you doing this? Saying, well, we're here to help you improve your experience. But then if you do that and then like nothing happens for 2 years because it takes an organization that long to do something.
You've probably ruined their perception.
It potentially could actually have a detrimental effect on their overall experience. So you want to make sure that you actually come up with those quick wins and address them quickly, because then it can have that incremental improvement to someone's experience.
Or if you can't implement them straight away, at least keeping those customers in a loop. So
yes, that's the thing as well.
When we develop these journey maps and tie them to a strategy or an implementation roadmap, we also make sure that the organizations keep the customers that they've involved in the process, as well as the stakeholders internally, in the loop. So that can be through as simple as just a monthly communications or something that keeps them up to date on how they're tracking, how they're prioritizing these different things. And so that sort of is able to manage those perceptions as well. The other one, which is sort of a pitfall of journey maps as well, is the complexity that they can have. So in terms of simplifying a journey map, it's really important to have that iterative process because you're not going to get it right. You're going to get it all up there, and then you'll be like, wow, look at all this data, but it's just not going to be easily communicated. And that's where something you mentioned at the beginning, something like storyboarding can be really helpful in being able to, especially at those higher levels, depending who you're communicating it to, it can be really sort of impactful rather than showing them the real technical details, which might be more suited to a more technical audience.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And I think when you first have all the information, I think it's good to just get it all out, put it all down. But then you got to start kind of cutting down. And I think with some of the actions too, you could have every little action, every little step someone goes through. But can you just bundle those together into a collection of actions within a stage? Because that way it just makes it a lot easier, I think, when you're presenting back a journey map and using it as a tool. You don't want to have every little thing, but then it can become like a process map as well. And that's not what a journey map is. There is a difference between a process map and a journey map. Well, I was gonna say, another challenge as well is also how do you then visually present the information? We typically do it. It's a document we kind of build. You print it out. You can have it as a PDF. You can go through. But I don't know. I'm really wanting to see more journey maps, and you need time with it, but more visual, more using AI, different technology, different tools to build out a journey map. And I want to ask you, what's your ideal way of visualizing a journey map?
I think based on what I was saying before around, you're ultimately first going to use this tool to communicate it to different stakeholders, different audiences within the organization. So someone at the board level is not really going to care about the technical details. They're going to care about the causes and consequences of the pains along the way. So being able to tailor that at a moment's notice rather than building out a full new map would obviously be a delightful experience for us, but also for people to just be able to flip the switch and be able to reframe the journey map in a way that's easily communicable to different parts of that organization. So I think that's one. We could talk about immersion as sort of a more extreme version where someone could put a headset on and walk through a journey. That would ultimately be a great way for people to empathize. But I think, something you mentioned there, which we haven't really touched on yet, also in the journey maps, is the technology side of things. So we do add sort of technology lanes or systems lanes into those journey maps to talk about, say, the CRM that's being used or the IT system that underpins all of it. But it's funny because a lot of organizations we work with often primarily care about the technology. Maybe we need to map out a journey to see where a new IT system would fit into that, or something that add some technology. There are solutions in AI we're seeing now which can obviously improve the process, but it's not one platform. It's a lot of different use cases where you can sort of implement small use cases of AI and sort of implement that throughout the journey. So technology is important, but I think if we're putting people at the center of the process first and foremost.
I love my dream is to build a super immersive VR journey map where it's you're stepping through, you're stepping into the room, you can experience the things. Even better, cooler one, actually, no, this is crazy. It's you think 4D movies, whatever, you get a little water splashing or whatever. Then you're in the journey map and it's you have a fall, someone kicks you. That's probably too much, but I think an immersive journey map, we can actually kind of visualize and see what that experience like from the perspective of the different customers within the journey. I think that would be a really great tool and a fun way as well for people to really immerse and understand. And I think to build empathy with the different customers they're trying to solve problems for.
And that may be something that AI could help with in the future, considering we've got models now, at least at the time of recording, things like Sora, that could help easily sort of turn a action in or prompt into a video of some sort. Or even there's models now that can create sort of 3D worlds or
I think that's something I've seen.
Assets. So there could be things like that could definitely take it to that next level, build greater buy-in, alignment, and be able to really pull people into empathizing with customers or employees.
You want to be able to, I think, include as much information at the journey as possible, but in the simplest, most visually accessible way for someone. Because there's a lot of information that's complex, but if you can just simplify it and people just get it, that I think is what you want. And that's when you've got a successful journey map. Because if people can get it, it depicts the experience, and then you can build solutions from that. I think that's really crucial.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're probably going to wrap up soon. Any like other piece of advice or key takeaways you'd like to give to people listening today?
I guess the future state journey map is something. So there's two ways about it. You can either sort of continue building on the current state, or you can map out a future state, which could definitely sort of integrate with any strategy you're developing yourself. So it's really easy to visually depict the experience you're trying to create for customers, and then the strategic initiatives that underpin that. So you can definitely link those bits together. I think in terms of advice for people is a journey map is only gonna be as good as the amount of time you iterate it, the amount of people you sort of get in the room together to fully understand it. And obviously, we don't have unlimited budgets to develop one of these things. It doesn't have to be, as we've described, this amazing immersive experience, but it just has to be enough to align people on the right problems and challenges. The other thing I'll just quickly mention is the role of AI. AI is becoming much more prominent. Excuse me. And there's a lot of opportunities in either when you're mapping the journey or when you're bringing people together. If you understand the capabilities and limitations that these great technologies have, like large language models, there's a lot of specific instances where we've even looked at maps now where you've got a range of steps sort of that are very manual tasks that could be easily sort of augmented or automated, so that rather than waiting 5 days for a service team member to come back to you, it's literally an hour or something. And it's not by replacing them, it's literally just by augmenting the workflow that they take. So that's another great opportunity that should be looked at by organizations looking to do
I
this.
think that's a really good point. I think thinking about where different AI solutions can come in, and you're right, it's not to replace the people doing that role, it's just to like make it more efficient, and then you can just repurpose what they do. I know like with aged care actually, there was a lot of, especially when we talked to the different employees who would enable the experience, there's a lot of like manual tasks there, and it's like, well, how can we like simplify that with AI, and then you can give back more time for them to care for the actual people within like the nursing home, for example. So I think that's like a really good call out. And I guess for me, the one key takeaway I'd say about journey maps is that you need action. It's a tool, but you don't just want to like, I see a lot of organizations like create these journey maps and then it just like, nothing happens, it just sits there, sits in a SharePoint folder, and then it gets looked at, sits on the wall, but then like you need to take action.
Tattered, burned down.
That's a bit grim, but I get it, but you need to take action from it. I think that's the most important thing, like address those quick wins, actually put time, invest some money into building out some of the solutions and like trialing it and like testing it with then the customers so that you can actually like improve the experience and have some new exciting offerings, different services for the different people that you're trying to improve their lives for.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's where sort of those next steps, once you have the journey map, you sort of are able to put a prioritization framework together, a working group together, and then sort of a regular governance or something around those initiatives that you've chosen to implement. That's a great starting point, even if it's just for the quick wins. So,
exactly. Well, look, thanks, Liam. It's been great to chat about
Marcus.
journey mapping. For our listeners, if you'd like to learn more about journey mapping, about the work we do at the strategy group, feel free to look at our website, follow us on LinkedIn, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.